All right. So the last thing we're really going to work on is we're going to introduce the same objects that we introduced you to in that idea of the object-oriented programming. We're going to create a card game that's going to simulate playing our favorite casino game called 21 or blackjack. And so to do that, we need a few things in our arsenal. So we're going to introduce you to, on page 249, the Alien Blaster program. And so the Alien Blaster program just demonstrates how we're going to pass messages from one object to another object. So I'm going to launch idle real quickly. And as quickly as it'll launch. There we go. And start a new construct. And so I'm going to call this one Alien Blaster. So we're going to create a couple of objects, and we're going to pass messages back and forth, just to show how we can do that. So we're going to create a first class. We're going to call our class Player. And again, we can use that triple quote to explain what it is. So this is a player in a shooter game. And then we can put in a method for this particular guy. So he's going to have a method called blast. And notice it's going to reference both self and enemy. The player blasts and enemy. And we're going to create something here. We're going to say enemy dot die. All right, so interesting. And so now we're going to create our class for alien. Again, it's an object. So this one's going to have a function. We're going to call it die. And so when it dies, it's going to output a statement and saying, I am now dead. You shall all fear the wrath of my millions of eggs that survive. Something like that. Just a statement that's going to say, it's going to print out. So our main then, our main really is just going to, so we're going to say hero. Scroll all the way to the left. Let me break this line apart so it doesn't drive me crazy. All the way to the left. So hero is equal to player, so we can create a player. Invader is going to be equal to the alien. And then once that runs, we're going to call out then. So we're going to go hero.blast. I have to save it in some So it runs, and what it does, so if I look at this, it creates two different classes, so a player and an alien, and we created those when we ran that line. Just by creating that class doesn't create an instance of it. So we created that, and then it actually passed a message then from one object to another. So we're just showing how we can do that. And so on page 251, there's some explanation about how we send and receive those. So if we're going to create a deck of cards and we're going to play with it, we really need to figure out how we're going to create a card class. So we're going to create instances of cards for our game, and each card is going to be a separate object. So we're going to create a couple of things here to demonstrate how we're going to get there. So the first thing on page 252 is we're going to create a card class. So I'm going to create another one of these, File, New. And I'm going to create one that we're going to call a deck of cards. And so this is going to be interesting because we're going to actually take objects and combine them with other objects. So we're going to take those cards and we're going to create them into a hand eventually. But the first thing we need to do is figure out how to create a set of cards. So we're going to create a class. We're going to call this class card. So to do that, we have a couple of things we need to deal with, and we know that cards have both a rank, or a number and a letter value, and they have a suit. So what we can do is we can grab that idea and we can actually put them into a couple of different constructs here. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to do rank. And so the ranks, we know what all the ranks are. We're going to create then a list of all the items in there. To save a little time, I'm going to grab my pre-existing list here. So we have the ace, king, queen, and in this case we just said ace 2, depending on how you're going to score that. So all the different ranks. So there should be 13 of them in there. Well, if we're going to do a rank, then we need the suits the same way. And then we're just going to set them equal to a value. And so in this case, so now we have all 4 of our suits. So we have our clubs, we have our diamonds, we have our hearts, and we have our spades. What we haven't done, though, is we haven't put them in anything yet. So we're going to do a string method, and we're going to combine these together. So we're going to create a method, and this is one of those special methods. So notice it's got the 2 underscores in front of it. So we call our constructor. And now we'll be able to call those items. And now we're going to do another special function here. We're going to use a string function. And this is where something magical is going to happen. And we'll show you what's going to go on here. So now, we're going to combine that rank and the suit together, because we want to create a card object for each one. So there'll be a combination of both of those. So self.rank plus self.suit. And we're going to return out of this function that value we called rep. And we could call it anything we wanted to. So now we've created our card. So this, it'd be helpful if I didn't have a capital there. So now we've created a deck of cards, essentially. Well, now what we want to do is we want to put together a portion of those to create our hand. So we want to create a hand of cards. So we're going to create another class. So I'm going to create a class out of objects that are already existing. So I'm going to create one called a hand. And so now we can do a couple of things. So we're going to create a function or a method here, our constructor. Self. And when that runs, it's going to call self.cards. And that's going to load that up, right, every time that hand function gets called. So now we have a few other pieces we need to do to create that. So on the top of page 256, hang on, 254, sorry. I'm getting the wrong number. So we need to create this, finish this method out. And so we have a few pieces to do. And what we're going to do then is we're going to create a really quick hand. So I'm going to shortcut this just a little bit. And I am going to grab a couple of functions here. So my string object here. So this one's going to grab the card for us. If there's not a valid card, it's going to load again. We also may want to clear out. So we need some other functions in here. So we're going to create a function to clear our hand. Self.cards equals, and we're just going to create a blank. And we need a way to add a card to our hand. So we're going to create a function called add. And we're going to use that append function we've used before. And maybe we even need to give a card away. So if we're going to give one and put it into a different hand, so we could have multiple hands. So the basics of this we could use for almost any card game. Whether we write a Go Fish game, whether we write a blackjack game, maybe you wanted to play Pinochle, whatever games you're going to create, you could use these functions. So we're going to use one called give, self, card. We're going to create one called other hand. And we're going to use a remove function. So removing one card. And we're going to add it then into the other hand. So in other words, you're swapping cards from one hand to another. Is what the goal of that piece is. So in our main function, so we're going to do a couple of things here. We want to create some cards. So we're going to test out looking at different ways we can create them. And so we're going to call the first one card 1. So let me make sure we're in main. Make sure we demonstrate it here. So we're back in main and we're going to create card 1. and we're going to pass in rank equals ace, suit equals clubs. And so we can actually override and we could pass in data. And now if I print card 1, let me see what happens. Now if I typed all this right, let's see what happens. I need to call this one card and store it in Python. And notice what it does. It returns that AC. So we have an ace of clubs. So lowercase for suit, uppercase then. So we can read that. It doesn't give us a great graphic picture of an ace of clubs, but we could see that it actually does hold that inside of that value. So it took the ace, took the C, created an object named card. Well, we can do other ones. So we could do card 2. So we could do this one as rank equals 2, suit equals and so we could put in several of these to create different objects. So we can create the cards. We can do that, and I'm going to grab a couple of other ones just so we have them all in here. So now we've got a hand of. So now we've got this hand, ace 2 3 4 5. That'd be a great poker hand. So we could print any of these cards. So any of those we do, we're going to print card 5 or 4, whatever it was. I typed, managed to. And now we can see we have 2 cards in there. So we could print out all of the cards. Well, I would like, though, to create an object, and I'd like that object to be that hand. So we created a second function up here called hand, and I'd like to put those cards into a hand. So first thing I'm going to do here, so I can print all those cards out, and I'm going to say, so my hand, and I'm going to call the hand function or object here. So I've now created one, and I'm going to print out and see if there's anything in it. So it says, oh, nope, your hand is empty. Okay. That, if it would have had objects in it, I would have been very scared. So now I want to figure out how I can put some in there. So I'm going to say my hand dot add, and I'm going to put in card 1. And now, just so I can see it, I'm going to print my hand. We'll see if it did add it in there. And so notice it was empty, and then it says, nope, now I have object AC. So I'm going to load up that cards here really quickly. And I'm going to come back up here to my statement here where I said add 1. Well, because I'm adding these, I'm just going to copy and paste 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to go back up here and change that number. And so now, if I run this, now my hand has that ace of clubs, 2 of clubs, so it's got all of the cards in it. So I've passed them in. So I've got an object comprised of other objects. So I can actually put them inside of each other. So I created a hand. There's my hand of cards. Well, I want to demonstrate a couple of other things. So I'm going to create one called your hand. And I'm going to do it the same way we created my hand. And if I printed it right now, it's going to be empty, obviously. But I'm going to show that we can hand over a couple of those cards. So my hand.give, I'm going to pass card 1 to your hand. And maybe I'll do I'll give you card 2. So card 1 and 2. So now I want to print those out. And so I want to print my hand. And I'm going to print out so I want to make sure that that really did work. And notice we started out, hand was empty. Now the hand had 5 cards. After I gave them away, it has 3, and your hand has 2 cards. So we can actually pass those around. We can try some other functions. So we could try my hand.clear. And now, notice it cleared out. It passed those 2 out, and then it cleared out that hand. So we're getting a little closer. We can manipulate those cards, and we can put them into different objects. So we can see that we can create objects based on other objects. So on page 256, they talk about a really, really interesting thing called inheritance. So just like you inherit from your parents' characteristics, you can pass down characteristics to other objects. So I don't have to recreate all the pieces of an object. I can inherit attributes about it. So I'm going to modify this one just a little bit. And I'm going to make this one, I'm going to leave the cards up there the same, but I'm going to say that this one is going to be about inheritance. So we can start to look at that. So on page 257, 258, we're going to have these objects that are the same. So we have cards, we have hands. Well, now we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to get rid of all my junk here. We're going to create something called a deck. So a deck of cards then is going to have all of those attributes, and we're going to pass some of those attributes down. So we don't need to recreate all of the items every time because we already have them existing in the cards, the attributes of the functions and the attributes of the rank and the suit. We don't need to pass that directly in. We can just slide it down and say, all right, we're gonna create one. So I'm going to create a class, and we're going to call it deck. But this one, notice instead of just saying I'm just going to use the generic object, I'm basing it on hand. So we're going to create a deck of playing cards. So because it's going to take information out of those other ones, we don't have to go in and do a lot. We can first just say we want to have something called a populate function. And that populate function is going to go in and create a deck that's going to have one of every object. And so we're going to have a for loop for suit in card dot suit. So it's going to create a for loop for every item in suits. And then inside of that, we're going to nest a loop. We're going to put another for loop for rank in card dot ranks. So what that's going to do is it's going to loop through all of the suits and all of the ranks, and it's going to loop 52 times in the center, and it's going to create every card in our deck. So self dot add so that populate is what creates that entire deck of cards. Now, the problem with that's going to be, once we create them, we know the order of those cards, and we want to change them up a little bit. So we're going to create another function called shuffle. And luckily for us, Python already makes this really easy. We know we need a random statement. So we're just going to put it right inside of this method. So import random. And we're going to do random.shuffle. So now that shuffle function is going to shuffle all of those cards around. So the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a deal function in. So deal, we're going to define deal. And it's going to be self, hands, and so now we're going to build right into this a function. We're going to do it with a for loop for rounds in range. So in other words, we can control how many of those we do. Then inside of that, we're going to put a loop for hand in hands. So you control how many cards and how many different people have hands of cards. Just a second, I will look at this one. And how badly I have typed that wrong. So we also are going to put in a little bit of error checking, because one of the problems is we could deal out of cards and we don't have any way to know that. We're going to go backwards and we're going to do an else statement. So this will only, so this if statement, so as long as there are still cards, this will work. Otherwise, we're going to come back in and say out of cards. So what's interesting though is this deck gets all of the functions from the hand by inheritance. We don't have to put any of these functions directly or methods directly into deck. Because we inherited those, we don't have to deal with any of that. So in our main function then, we could say deck1 is equal to, and we can then call our deck function see that. Hold on. I'll put it in the mirror where I can see it. So it doesn't show us that it did anything yet. It created this deck. If I printed it, let's see what it does. And it says, oh, you have an empty deck. We didn't populate that deck yet. And so we'll actually have to go in and we'll have to populate it to create anything. So we printed it and it's empty. So now let's do a populate. So deck1.populate. And we'll do a print again. So print deck1. And I did something in my code here. Hang on. Suit is, what did I call it? Line 64. Apparently, I can make really good typos. Alright. Alright. So now I ran it again. So I started out empty, and now I created a deck. But again, notice it's all in order. So that doesn't do us a lot of good because we have all those objects in order. If we're playing war, you can see exactly what's going to come up next. So we need to run another function. So we're going to run the shuffle function, and we can see what's going to happen there. So now we want to do deck1.shuffle. And now we can print that deck out again. So here's our unshuffled version. And then here it is shuffled. So Python does a really nice job for that. Shuffles us for us. We have some other methods in here. I can clear that deck out. So deck1.clear. And notice, if I look up in my code, I didn't create, I did a populate, I did a shuffle. I didn't create a clear function. That inherited out of another one. So I can do a clear function, and then I can do a print. Deck1. So once again, we cleared it out. But again, that was an inherited function, which is what we wanted to kind of create here. So now, all right, we got all those pieces, and I'm going to delete that because we know that will work. We know those work now. I want to create then a hand. So let's create a hand of cards and see if we can do that. My hand equals hand. Your hand equals so we're going to create a hands. We're going to put something that's going to combine both of those. So notice we created a list item here and we passed that into hands. So deck1.deal. And I'll show you why we did that in just a second here. So hands per hand equals 5. So up here, when we created this function, deal, and I said, all right, we're going to put in hands and per hand. So how many hands? And here we passed in 2 of them. And here we have per hand equal 1. By default, we passed in 5. So we overrode that. So this should deal out, so we can print my hand print your hand and barring any horrible typos, which I can't guarantee, that's going to actually deal the cards, and that will actually then give you 2 sets of cards that we said had 5 in each of them. So let's see if it works. And what did I do here? Somewhere I mistyped something really badly. Your hand, my hand. If I could see on the monitor that it would display, it would be really handy. But let's just do it this way. So if I run this, hang on, I pulled some of those back. So here it's going to show that my hand, so here we dealt 5 cards, and your hand, and then the entire deck, what's left, we're going to do there. So not only can we do that, we can pull items out of there, because we want individual items. Because once you've dealt a card, it's got to be gone from the deck. So there's your hand, my hand, and we did that all with just this simple function here. We passed in how many per hand, that you're going to do 2 hands. So then we did a deck clear at the end, and notice then we're back to nothing in that particular deck. So we can manipulate these objects around. So we can create an object of other objects. So on page 267, well, that starts on polymorphism. You're going to need to read a little more on it. We'll talk about your assignment for that. So we're going to go and we're going to start creating then our blackjack game. So we already have some of these pieces that we're going to create. So we're going to create, we know we need those card modules. We know we're going to create a couple of other pieces. So if I look on page 9 or 274, there is a table 9.1. And so underneath it is a hierarchy chart. And that hierarchy chart can show us how we're inheriting things from one to another. Table 9.1 tells us what all these classes are and how we get some of them. So we need to understand how blackjack works. We need to kind of understand how we can use some of these classes. We've got all the elements. We can create cards. We can create hands. So if you notice up here, we have BJ game at the very bottom of that chart. That's an entire game. It's an object. And what does it do? It defines a deck, a dealer, and the attributes for the players. So once we get that one, it inherits all those pieces from everything underneath it. So down here on the bottom of page 274 is our pseudocode for this game. So that's that logic behind the game. So some of us have played 21 before, some of you might not have. The object is to get as close to 21 as possible without going over in a real short strategy. So initially you deal 2 cards to each player. So if you get your cards and you add them up, and you say, wow, I only have 10 points and I need to hit again because I know that that one's not going to win. You can ask for an additional card, and so we've created a loop. For every player that's involved, we ask them to ask for a hit if they need one. And while the player is not bust, in other words, they haven't went over 21, they can continue to get cards. If there are no players still playing, show the dealer's 2 cards. So you don't know what the dealer has up front in this particular case. So you have to try to get as close to beat the dealer. All right, so otherwise, so if there are still players playing, while the dealer must hit, so the dealer has some rules about when they have to continue to try to get cards. If the dealer is busted, for every player who's still playing, they win. Otherwise, so if the dealer stops because he hits a rule that says, oh, I have 17, I can stop now, then we'll have a comparison of the cards and we'll try to see who wins. And so that's where that otherwise lists, if the player's total is greater than the dealer's total, the player wins. If the player's total is less than the dealer's total, the player loses. The player loses. Otherwise, so in other words, if we have a tie, if the dealer has 17 and you have 17, you're going to lose in this particular case. So we want to look at this program and try to understand a little bit of how it works. So one of the interesting pieces we do with this is we're actually going to inherit modules. And so not only can I import random, can I import pickle, import dump, import those functions. In this particular case, I'm actually going to import a function that we created. And so in this particular case, we're going to input a module for a demonstration. We're going to import cards and games. So rather than have those in our main program, so here's cards. So this is a card module. So it is standing alone as a program all on its own. So when I run the main blackjack program, it goes out and it grabs this one, and it loads this class player that we haven't yet created. So if I tried to run this game, so if I downloaded the source code and I said I'm going to run blackjack, so I'm going to pull it over here and look at it to start with. So we know it's going to use cards, but notice it doesn't pull any of those on its own. If I go through the classes, I don't see anywhere where it talks about cards or hands or decks. And it actually grabs them from right here. Now, there's a secret to that. Those have to be in the same file folder as the rest of your program. So if I don't have cards and games here, or if I change their names, this program's going to crash. So I have to have those files all in the same area. I can name them in different ways to get them in different directories, but it's a little out of scope of here. So they have to be in the same area. And so in fact, I'm going to run this so we can look at it. So it actually says how many players are we going to play. So I'm just going to play one to start with. And I'm going to put in my name. And so it's going to show me my cards. So I have a 3 of clubs and an ace of clubs. I have a score of 14. The dealer, notice what it does. It shows me one of his cards, and it's swapped out and shows XX for one of them. It doesn't let me see what the dealer has. So I have to do a little guessing. Well, the dealer's showing 3. The most I could have is 13. They're probably going to have to hit. I only have 14. And what I have as a really good card is I have that ace. So an ace in this game also does something kind of weird. It can be either a 1 or it can be an 11. So if I get a card, so I'm going to say yes. Now notice what it did. Because I got, in this case, a queen, it changed that value of that ace to a 1. So it actually did what it's supposed to, and now I'm still at 14. All right, so I'm going to have to hit again and probably bust. Somehow I didn't, and I'm going to say, nope, I'm done. The dealer then, now it's going to show his hand. So we knew he had that 3. Underneath there he had a 6 of clubs. He drew a 2 of diamonds, so he has a score of 11. So he has to hit again. He hit again and got 15, which is under, I think we have it set up at 16 he has to hit. So he deals again, and it says, oh, yep, the dealer busts, I win. Do I want to play again? So no. So we created a game, and if we look at the structure of the game, it follows this pseudocode here. And so we run a couple of functions then, or modules, and so we'll start looking at those and how this game works. So your homework this week, you have 2 pieces for your homework this week. So week 15. So there's 2 assignments, each worth 10 points. So notice I said you need to read up about polymorphism. So week 15, there's an assignment where you need to find some information about polymorphism, use outside resources, cite them, write a paragraph about polymorphism. That's 10 points out of 20. The other 10 points comes out of an assignment here dealing with this card program we're working on. So as we go through this, we're going to find that there's some errors or some potential errors that can occur. So I'm even going to tell you one of them. I'm going to say one of them is to check to see if there's enough cards left to deal around. If there's not, repopulate and reshuffle the deck. This portion of the assignment is worth 10 points. But I also give you the chance to earn 10 additional bonus points. So, the second 5 points you can earn, find an additional place that needs some kind of error checking and detail in the comments what you were doing. So in other words, if you make a change, let me know what it is. I need to figure out what you're doing. This can be worth up to 5 additional bonus points. Again, you can find a second additional error check, and you can detail it, and you could earn, again, another additional 5 points. So, the craziness, you can earn 10 bonus points for a 10-point assignment. So that's going to be our assignment this week. So you need to be able to modify and figure out how we're doing this. So we're going to work through how this program functions. On Thursday, we're going to look through Blackjack. And hopefully we can spot some places where you can add some of that, the error checking code. The other piece we need to talk about really quickly is the final. Yes, we have one. I know. Yes, besides the assignment this week. So this assignment's due this Sunday, and then we actually have a final. So there is a 51 question final. Yes, for the most part. So 51 questions. So it will reopen again on Tuesday, May 1st. and it's open until Thursday at midnight. It will be open during those times. You must complete it prior to midnight on the 4th. I'm going to turn in grades on the 5th, hopefully, before graduation, so we need to do that before the 4th. It will live in the folder called Final. So it is not designed to be torturous. There are some coding snippets in the Final, but it's multiple choice, so you have to figure out what will happen. You are encouraged to have a version when you take this of idle running, so that you can put in those code snippets and try them. So there's no reason actually in this Final everybody should not get 102% or whatever is available. I think there's a bonus. So that will pop up next week during finals week. So as a hybrid course, the final is actually available or scheduled to be Thursday at 8 a.m. I'm not going to torture anybody and require you to show up at Thursday at 8 a.m. If you want to, however, I will generally, if I find out that people are going to show up on Thursday at 8 o'clock, or for any final at some ungodly hour like that, I will generally have donuts and coffee available. That's the one bonus to showing up at Thursday. Next, like, I'm not sure that's enough of a bonus. No, and certainly if you're commuting back and forth, yeah, go buy a donut locally. I'll reimburse you. Bring in a ticket. All right. So on Thursday we're going to work on the blackjack program in depth. So we're going to try to figure out how it works, what kind of pieces are in there, how can I modify it and change it, and what kind of things can we do. So take a look at it. The code is all in the book. So you can mark it up and you can look and go, well, I see where I might be able to do something interesting with